I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. Here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Oh, I'm so excited tonight. This is the first time that we're doing an international podcast, two separate ways that we have a guest on that is going to have a mix of a British accent and the eastern side of Canada. There are little things that excite me. Tanya is our guest. Can't wait to get to know Tanya tonight. Tanya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited too. You have John with us. We have Steve with us.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
We just want to hear your story. So I know you had an anniversary recently.
I did.
Know a bunch of things about you, but just start wherever you want to start. Tell us your story. Give us a little experience, strength, and hope.
Whew. Wow. So hi, my name's Tanya. I haven't had a drink since January 11th, 2008. So I've celebrated just over 14 years. And I'm so grateful. You know, I try not to, I don't say it to brag. You know, a lot of people say that. I don't say it to brag. I don't. You know, sometimes I pinch myself. And one thing I realized, because yes, I do have a bit of an accent. I have a bit of many accents. I've actually been sober half the time in the UK and half the time in Canada, because I moved to Canada nearly 7 years ago. So it's crazy because the last 7 years have been a blur for me. Like I've just got here because the first 7 years dragged. They dragged. But it's, you know, I did get sober in England, and my first meeting was in Liverpool in one of the cathedrals, because I'm classy, you know, do it in the basement of a cathedral, not just in like a cheap church basement, you know.
Was it one of those business casual ones? You had to wear khakis or something, or a nice skirt?
No, nothing like that, because otherwise I wouldn't have got in. But yeah, it was just like in Liverpool. It's a very working class city. You know, that's where I'm from. I'm actually from the Wirral Peninsula. It's a little knob in the country between North Wales and Liverpool. But because no one knows where that is, I just say I'm from Liverpool, right? But my first meeting was in Liverpool, and in this basement, and I was 18 years old, petrified, you know, hadn't showered for 3 weeks. I was wearing this bright orange sweater. I'm 6 foot, and not that anyone can tell. And I was about 300 pounds, and I didn't want anyone to notice me, you know, and I was petrified.
It's a good shirt to wear then, bright orange. Nobody's going to see you.
Bright orange, like honestly. It was in the middle of March, and as I say, I hadn't showered in weeks. I hadn't done laundry in months. I had the red wine stained teeth. My hair was sticking to my head. And I didn't think anyone would notice me. And then the thing is, that got me more is people knew that I was new. Like, that's what shocked me the most. How did you know? It was pretty obvious, you know, not just the fact that I was stinking, but I was shaking, you know. And bless those people in that meeting. No one gave me the side eye. No one judged me. They just said, you know, if you got a problem with alcohol, you're in the right place. And the truth is I definitely, at that age, even had a problem with alcohol. Didn't know if I was an alcoholic. You know, I just came because I was told that it might be a good idea.
When did you start drinking?
The British alcoholic drinking age is about 13. You
know, how old?
About 13, like not 13? Really. Yeah, something like that. Well, you know, I mean, I always talk about, like, you know, Christmas time, I was probably about 7 or 8, and my mum gave me a red wine spritzer with like an inch of wine, and the rest was spritzer, right? And I remember sitting at the table and my mum telling me to sip it. So like a good potential alcoholic, I just chugged it, right? And I loved it. And I remember my nan saying, you know, she's going to be a drinker, that one. Little does she know that many years later I'll be sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I probably had friends at like 13, 14, and their friends, you know, their parents would let us have like Alka-Pops. I think you guys call the coolers over here. So like Smirnoff and like all that kind of stuff. It's just juice essentially with a bit of alcohol in it. And they would kind of portion it so we had one each, but I would steal one and drink it in the toilets, like thinking that was normal, right? So I would try and sneak booze, but my alcoholism didn't really kick off until I was about 16. I had a very taut relationship with my mum. My mum was a single parent for the most part. My dad was around the best he could, but he was and still is an addict. And he's happy with what, where he's at. He really is. But with my mum, she did the best she could. And I didn't see that at that age. I felt she was very emotionally abusive. She was good at throwing things, like, that kind of stuff. And at 16, she was done with me and I was done with her. And I moved in with my dad. That didn't really work out. So I moved into the shelter system at 16. And the first 3 weeks in the shelter system, I was in this emergency shelter. And the first night I was there, and I lived a very sheltered life, really. There was this guy coked off his head and kicking down the fire door to the kitchen because it closed 5 minutes before. All he wanted was his beans on toast. Mm-hmm. And he was letting us know that that's what he wanted. And I thought, wow, this is wild, And I talked to that guy the next day because he realized I was the only person that wasn't getting my bags checked every time I came into the hostel, because I was in grammar school at that point. I was very academic. And so he was like, hey, can you go to the off-licensed liquor store, get some booze for us? And I was like, yeah, okay. So I did. They didn't check the bags because obviously you couldn't have booze in this place. And we sat in his little room and drank. And I realized how better I felt because I was so alone in that hostel. I had no family to talk to. I had no real friends. And I had just me. And so the more I drank, the less I felt, And if I drank even more, I forgot what was making me feel bad in the first place, which is the history of my alcoholism, really. And then after 3 weeks, I moved into the more upper class hostel. And I lived there for 2 years. And the only thing that kept me going, as my wife says, it's the glue that kept it together with alcohol. That alcohol was that glue that kept me together through a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma. And, it was very stressful in those 2 years. And drinking saved my life. It really did. Then it stopped doing what I wanted it to do. No matter how much I drank, I still couldn't get up in the morning. My attendance dropped in school. I couldn't go to exams without being half in the bag. I didn't pass my exams because I was half in the bag. And I was just an absolute mess. And when I tried to stop because I realized the drink wasn't doing it for me, I found out that I couldn't. And that was my problem. I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. And I tried for a long time to try and stop. Well, not as long as a lot of people, but like by my standards, like a year and a half, 2 years, it was tough. I tried counseling. I tried, we called it Wirral Alcohol Savings. It's like a harm reduction. And, they said, do you want to try controlled drinking or complete abstinence? And I'm like, well, I'm not stupid. I still want to drink. So let's do the controlled drinking thing. So she said to me, the counselor said to me, so, okay, how much do you drink? So I halved it because, again, I'm not stupid. And they were like, ooh, that's an alcohol counselor saying, ooh, like I must have been drinking a fair bit. And she said, okay, well, let's try with like maybe 1 or 2 drinks every other night. Here's a drink diary. I want you to write down before you take the drink. So that was on a Monday. My appointment was on a Monday. So the following Monday, I was in the pub across the street from where the counseling was with a pint in my hand, writing the drink diary from the week before, and I wonder why it didn't work for me. Couldn't be honest, and it's not that I didn't want to be. Yeah, I was scared of like what people would think of me, but I could not. I was one of those people that had the, inability to be honest with myself or others.
I think there's a commonality there. I had this conversation with somebody last night, and I don't know if you guys have had the same thing, but the whole, I'm going to tell the doctor that I'm drinking, but I'm going to give a fraction of what I'm drinking. And even the lie gets the doctor's eyes popping.
Right.
Well, the doctor was able to see my blood results. So no matter what I told him, he knew it wasn't true because, he was able to see the liver enzymes going through the roof. So, I think that was pretty normal. That for not everybody, some people went in and told their doctor the truth. I wasn't one of them. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've never met anyone that has, but I'm really happy for them,
One thing I just find interesting about what you just shared there is you said, you went into the shelter system at 16, and right after you said that, you said, I lived a sheltered life, meaning, sheltered life meaning like, it was kind of easy, not, I wasn't exposed to much, but brought up by a single mom with what you described as an addict dad. I just find that a little bit, that because I look back at my life as very normal for a long time, but I don't look at that life. I grew up with an alcoholic mother. Today I realize that's not normal. Right. And I would say the same thing. Like I used to always say, I had a great childhood, and the older I've gotten and the more I've dug into it, it wasn't so great. It wasn't so great. So I find that it's interesting that you still reflect back on it as a sheltered life, even though you're in the shelter system as on your own as a 16-year-old.
Yeah, and I find I feel like my life is very ironic, and that's one of them. Up until that age, before I moved in with my dad, I'm doing a psychology degree, and I'm working on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the bottom, the foundation is the physiological things. My mom gave me everything I needed: food, shelter, the clothes off me back, on me back, and I was a competitive swimmer. She paid for that. I was a St. John ambulance cadet. I did karate. She paid a lot of money, and she was on a single income, plus a bit of money from my dad and child support. And the friends that I had were very, not necessarily middle class, but pretty close by our standards. So I didn't really hang around with people who were, the troubled kids, you would say. Like, I was the perfect child in school, such a people pleaser. And when I moved into the shelter system, that's absolutely not normal. Up until one point, it was fully, right. I don't know anything about anything. I didn't really know about drugs, except maybe my dad. That's it, and again, I think you're right. It's not normal.
Right. Well, alcoholism, drug addiction as itself, it's the great non-discriminator. It doesn't matter, male, female, black, white, yellow, brown, your race, your religion, your sexual orientation. It doesn't give it your economic status. It doesn't care. Absolutely. You can live in a multi-million-dollar mansion and have the same disease as the person that's living out of a cardboard box. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care. Alcohol, drugs, that doesn't care. You as you were describing your story and what got you here, 16, 16 was the age that I started myself. And what you said there really just struck a chord is once you started, you couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And I found, it took me a while to identify that because, I always thought I controlled everything and everything was hunky-dory. Mm-hmm. But after I got sober, and like you said, once I became honest, I was able to really look back at how the life I had lived. And because I was ignoring the truth and I was being dishonest to myself, I didn't see that once alcohol crossed my lips, I couldn't stop. Because once I started drinking, I drank and I drank and I drank until I got where I wanted to be. And, Steve and I were on a hike this weekend, and our former guest from last week, we got drunk by accident. Well, it's intentional, but I drank so much that once I got to that place where I felt at ease, I had way too much booze in my belly and I was going to go over the edge. And then I discovered amphetamines to balance that off, So, that once you stop, once I started, I just couldn't stop, so I really can identify with that. And, the social status, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter where we came from. It's a disease that we are afflicted with, and it just happens.
I completely agree with you. And that's why, I struggled for the first 10 months in AA. My first meeting was in March of 2007. And for 10 months, I was going to meetings every day, but there's some of those meetings I'd be getting drunk. And what it was is, even though I said I was an alcoholic, because I got that unconditional love from you guys, from those meetings, and I didn't want to lose that, because finally I just felt a part of, like I always said, I only go to the same place twice, and the second time is usually to apologize. That was my life. So to be told to keep coming back. So I said I was an alcoholic. I admitted that I was an alcoholic, but I didn't accept it. And that was the problem with me with step one. Is admitting was easy. Accepting was difficult. And I had I'm too young for AA. I always said that I'm too young for this, because I brought the average age down at my first meeting to about 55. Everyone was ancient, right? They were old. They were like 40 or something. And actually most of them were in their 60s, 70s, and maybe even older. So I saw these old people. I'm a teenager, just at the legal drinking age, because the legal drinking age is 18, right? And I didn't feel a part of people talking about losing the jobs, losing the license, losing the kids, getting divorced. And I'm like, well, I've never lost my kids because I don't have any. I never got divorced because I never even had a relationship, never mind getting married. Never lost my license because I never got one. And I did lose a job. I had a job at a coffee shop right across the street from the hostel I lived in. And I lasted 3 days because I couldn't make it across the street to the coffee shop. And it's funny because I went home for the first time in 5 years in October last year. And I posted a video because I was in the area of, here's the hostel, here's the coffee shop. So you guys who hear me speak have the visual. And one of my sponsees thought that was the funniest thing, because it was probably, like just a short distance to a wall away, just across a small street. But I still felt different. And, I'm blessed to have gotten sober young. I don't take it for granted. But what I love now is when I see people come in their early 20s, maybe even in their early 30s, and they look at, they say the magical words in, near my earshot that says, oh, I'm too young for this. And I just come sliding in and go, hey, let me tell you how you're wrong, unless you're 16, and even then, let me tell you how you're wrong. But yeah, alcoholism doesn't discriminate. And like it says in some of the literature, there are people that are young that can come in. There's people who still have the families, and it's just about raising the bottom and being at your personal rock bottom and being willing to do anything. And
I had this conversation recently where we were talking about early stage alcoholism, mid stage, end stage. And if you're at that early stage, you haven't lost it all. This is for you. If you're the new guy, regardless of where you are, nothing says that you have to have a low bottom to come into AA. Steve shared the other day that, yes, AA was looking to put restrictions on early because he read about the building of AA, that they slowly went in, started with the low bottom because that's easy to find, and slowly worked their way into, hey, if you feel like you have a problem, you're in the right place. There's nothing that says that you can't come in early. And if you feel comfortable, that's okay. I felt I didn't earn my seat when I first came in because people were talking about bleeding from their ass, bleeding from their ears, bleeding from their mouth, and that never happened. And so I didn't deserve to be there. But I felt like I belonged, so I kept going. Mm-hmm. You don't have to compare this story. Identify where you can. That's the key.
And I was so grateful that, Bill Wilson saw that. And, in the 1950s, when the step book came out, they came right out in step one. They said when the big book Alcoholics Anonymous was first written, it dealt with the low bottom drunk, and over the years and over the decades, they discovered that they needed to raise the bar for the potential alcoholic, for the person that still had the house, the cars, the family, the job, and try to get to them and reach those people first before and save them 10 or 20 years of misery. Because I was like that. I could not relate to the big book at all. And now here we are, a handful of years later, I'm a big book thumper because I believe in it. Now I can see it. Now I can understand it. I couldn't accept it when I first come in. Just like you said, I had, I'm not that bad. I'm not one of those people. How can I be an alcoholic? I still have a job. I'm still married. I got 3 kids. I got a nice house and a great job. Nah, it was all a facade. It was all just smoke and mirrors. I was a garden variety drunk. I just couldn't face it.
I certainly could have. I qualified to come into these rooms at 19. By no question, but I couldn't identify as an alcoholic at 19. I'm not even sure I could identify that I was a problem drinker because it seemed like everybody around me was sort of in that same boat. It sort of seemed like they weren't, of course, but it seemed like that to me. So I certainly I could have qualified for it. But we also know somebody, the 3 of us know a fellow named Todd, and Todd came into the program first time when he was 14 years old. And wow. He did do some more experimentation, but he was in there a long time. But 14 years old. I mean, I started drinking at 13, so I wasn't ready for the rooms at 14. But it is tough to come in, and it's easy for young people to think like, oh, I haven't done enough of my drinking. I need to still do some. Like you said, I wanted to keep drinking, right? You didn't come into this room to stop drinking. You came in probably because like a lot of us, right? Oh, maybe I could figure out a way to moderate this stuff. Maybe I could figure out a way to control it, But I know that for us real alcoholics, as we like to say, there's no possibility to control it at all.
Well, they say it's the real illusion that, that the alcoholic somehow, some way thinks that they can drink normal again. It's the great illusion.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And, I think with a lot of us, we always try to see where we're different because we don't fit in. That's right. my addiction talking to me saying, you don't fit in here because of this. Therefore, you need to go the off license. You need to go to the liquor store, go to the pub, whatever. And the turning point for me was everyone was talking about this one guy, young Martin. Like in my hometown, we had nicknames. We didn't have initials, right? So talk to young Martin because his dad was old Martin. And they're like, go find him. He goes to this meeting. I went to the meeting and there's this one young guy. He was about 26. And he shared that he was 6 years sober and he was going to university to study, I think, pharmacy. And I was like, wow, I want to be like this guy when I grow up, Finally, someone that I could identify with. And I could identify with his story kind of, and like finally there was somebody that can actually say, you're not different. Here you go. Like what I do with young people now. And that guy took me under his wing. We went to McDonald's, like the 24-hour McDonald's, and sit up till 2 a.m. drinking decaf coffee and eating like the 20 packs of McNuggets, one each, because I don't share, I don't share anything. And that guy really was a lifesaver for me because, he was proof to me that I wasn't different and that I can get well and I can have a big fat life. And thank goodness for that guy, and thank God for the people that did the same for him, because that's what we do. We carry a message, and I'm sure if there's people listening that think they're different, sorry to burst your bubble, you're not. Like, there's niches about all of us, like I said at the start, but at the same time, we're not that special and different, But I've had a lot of dangerous things in AA. I like when I was young, the best was I've spilt more on my shirt than you've drank. Right. So I would respond with, well, if you drank it rather than spilt it, you might have come in sooner, because,
I gotta remember that one.
Me too. That's nice.
Yeah, honestly,
that's a good one.
Well, when I speak, like especially when I moved to Canada, I was doing a lot of speaking, right? Because I'm foreign, right? And everyone was like, you're such a good speaker. I'm like, good AA speakers, 90% of them are plagiarized, right? And it's just, the thing is these are British jokes. And they're in Canada, so none of you all have heard them. So you thought I made them up. So that's why you think it's funny, right? If you said that in a meeting in my hometown, they'd be like, that's it. Everyone else is falling about laughing in Canada, and in the States. But in the UK, it's like, oh, yeah, it's a good one. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And it doesn't discriminate, but we discriminate ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it being a safe space for LGBT people at this podcast, which I love, and I'm in the LGBTQ community, and I've been to LGBT meetings, and a lot of people will only go to LGBT meetings because they don't feel safe. And I feel so sad about that. I am, I've been with my partner, my wife, for 8 years. We've lived together nearly 7. And I never come out. When I speak at a meeting, I never say, as a gay woman or as a lesbian or whatever. I have to mention my partner because she gets jealous and mad if I don't. Sometimes it's a long drive home if I don't mention her. And but I refer to her as my wife for common law. We're not married. But if I say partner, they usually say, what's his name? And I go, well, this is awkward. But I've never felt discriminated, but I understand too why some people would feel that way. So I try and maintain a safe space in AA for someone in the LGBTQ community, for women, for young people, and that's my job as a sober member of AA, is making sure that safe is seat, the seat is safe, that people can come in. So, because people did that for me, right?
I think it's sad that can be the case. I am glad that there are meetings, same gender meetings to me are a very important part of your recovery. Men's meeting for men, women's meetings for women, but LGBTQ meetings for people who are part of the community. And I can't understand the life because I haven't lived it, but I understand that there's a lot of addiction there, and there could be concerns about coming forward and getting help. And that, AA says, I want to extend the hand of AA to anybody who needs help. And this is part of that.
Yeah. And especially I think with trans and non-binary folk, because this has been a topic with a few people lately, because they changed the preamble wording to people instead of men and women. I love it. I love it.
Right.
I agree with you. There's just a lot of
yeah. And I actually prefer the word individuals, like they do in other fellowships. I like individuals apart from people, but that's fine. Like, it's not about me. But I have talked to some old timers that are like, oh, why did we do it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm like, mate, it is broke.
Yeah.
What about a non-binary person who isn't man nor woman? I know you don't understand about this gender stuff, but acceptance is the answer to all our problems today. That's and right. I just start quoting that, what That's about love and tolerance is our code? And so when they changed that, and I've been talking to a few people who are trans and non-binary, and some of them don't even feel comfortable going to same-sex meetings, same-gender meetings, because even though they're, say, a trans woman, they're worried that the cisgendered women will judge them for being a trans woman. And I'm like, that makes me sad, And so again, if I ever see that happen, that newcomer ain't going to be judged openly by somebody else, because I'm not going to let that happen. I'm never going to let that happen.
And see, that's so important. It's easy for me. I'm a white male in America to go into a meeting and find somebody who looks like me and sounds like me and believes in a lot of the same things I believe in. And it's so important that you're in there so that newcomer who can come in there, and even if it's not part of your same community, could say, oh, look at this person, right? This person was able to come here. You can obviously tell that you're settled, you're comfortable in who you are and where you are in life and in your recovery, that you're such a, and I don't want to use the word role model, but you are something to look at, just like young Martin was for you, right? Right? Somebody could strive to be or be like and say, yeah, there's hope for me too. Right? If Tanya can do it, I can do it. right? And that's so important to do, because unfortunately there is a lot of, and Matt said it perfectly. I've never lived that life. I don't understand it. But I've gone back to it. One of the best things I heard years and years ago, was a sports radio commentator. He had his own show, and he said, and this was the first time I heard it, and I can remember I was still struggling with some of the gay marriage stuff early on. And he says, I don't have to understand it to accept it. And I went, this came out of a guy who did sports coverage. And I just so identified with that. And I went, okay, I don't understand it, but I can accept it, and I mean, literally, like, I changed on that moment. Like, okay, I can accept it. And then obviously I became, I had started having relatives come out and stuff like that, where I was able to understand it a lot better. And, but I just think it's so good that, not only you, I'm sure there's lots of people out there in the community, but I don't see them. Like, they're not in my meetings. This is my whole point, right? I don't see a lot of people from the LGBTQ community and out in the meetings I go. And I've known some men who have come in, gay men who've come in, and they have not been comfortable. They have not been comfortable, especially at the men's meeting and stuff like that. Because there are still a lot of, not only with the change it to the, to the people, but people who still struggle with that type of stuff. And it's not always very comfortable.
Yeah, and having that openness, like, for example, I've sponsored many people over the years, but one of my sponsees is a gay guy in his late 60s that I sponsor, because he saw me and he knew that I was queer, and he was like, hey, will you be my sponsor? I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, and I went through the steps with him, and him and I are on two completely parts of life, but he felt an affinity with me, and I love him to death, and the fact that, like, COVID's caused things to lock down is I haven't been able to see him in person for so long. But, the fact that he just saw me and felt comfortable, and I was like, absolutely, but yeah, I was going to say, you might not see gay people in the meetings. We might just hide it well, like I'm a very straight passing gay person, like, and I'm very, like, I've been talking about that a lot, because if someone sees me, they assume that I'm straight, which I don't care, but at the same time, it's kind of sad. Like, I don't really know. It's just, what I love is people having an extreme indifference, that when I do come out, they go, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Okay, like, I like the people are just like, all right, next, they don't care about sexuality. But we're a long ways from there. Not off topic, but like, not really.
But not really.
No, that's why you're here. I mean, the whole thing of you look gay, I never got that, because, if you put 20 people in the room and you tell me, pick out who's gay, who's LGBT, I wouldn't be able to. I would pick out something, I would miss it, because we look different, but we're all the same. It's, you take the color, the gender away, we're all the same on the inside. It doesn't matter. We're all made from the same thing. And we're all people. I and I heard the analogy, that, get the young kids, they're in kindergarten, or whether 3, 4, 5 years old. And I think it was a post on Facebook, and this one kid said, he's got his twin, and he wanted to be dressed just like his twin brother. So mom made an arrangement to make sure that they both had the same outfit for the day, and one was white and one was black. But in their eyes, they were twins. They both looked the same, because they're so young, and they haven't had that prejudice or that discrimination stuffed down their throats and made to believe that, these people are different.
That's right. I remember that post, and it's very powerful, really. But yeah, so, I mean, like I said, I struggled in AA in the beginning, and my aha moment was, listening to the same guy share the same story because, small town AA. And I was sitting there like a newcomer that had just been pushed in through the course system with like my arms folded, like proceed with caution tattooed on my forehead. And I just thought, I'm going to show you guys that I'm different. Everyone says they're going to have one, so I'm going to have two. And I went to the liquor store and bought 2 cans of like cheap lager because everyone talked about drinking that stuff. And I was sitting at a bus stop, like right next to this liquor store, drinking my first can, and the compulsion to drink. And I hadn't had a drink for 2 months at this point, made it through Christmas and New Year without drinking. White knuckle sobriety, literally like holding onto the chair for dear life. And that compulsion to drink, it was like a volcano. And I knew that I needed to drink more, but I didn't have the money. So I went to the house of an alcoholic who I met in AA that at 2 months sober, I was trying to save, even though she'd been in and out of AA for longer than I'd been alive. And I went there because I knew she had booze. So I drank with her, blacked out, and then came to the next day in my own bed, in my own home, fully dressed, sneakers still on, blood on the pillow, a gash on the back of my head, and no recollection of what happened. Turns out I fell up the stairs, because I saw the dent in the baluster, And I went to a meeting that night, tail between my legs, and not the first time I'd done this. And there was this guy there, his name was Gunnar Jim, and he looked like Father Christmas, and he had this waistcoat on, and he pretended to smoke from a pipe because he quit, and he swore like a sailor, like we all do in the UK, or especially in my county. And every time he would ask me the same question, right? He'd be like, have you had enough yet, kid? Every time. And I'd be like, yeah, Jim, I've had enough. And he'd just laugh at me and tell me to keep coming back, right? And this time he asked me the same question. He said, have you had enough yet, Jim? I said, I'm done. He said, good. Now do the effing work. And now that first 10 months of AA, I knew about sponsorship. I was told to, find someone who'd been sober a while to help me through the 12 steps. So this woman kind of appealed to me. So, I asked her to sponsor me and she said yes. And she asked me to pray every day, and I was an atheist. So I was like, nah. So I got another sponsor. And then that one told me to call her every day, and I didn't like that because I don't like phones. So I got another sponsor. And then that one told me to read from the big book. Well, I can't be bothered. So I got another sponsor. You see what's going on here, guys, right? So anyway, the thing is in the North Americas, you talk about 90 meetings in 90 days. I went through 90 sponsors in 90 days. And I wondered why, I wondered why.
Like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wondered why I couldn't get sober, So when Jim had said to me, do the work, minus the expletive, I found sponsor number 91. And she's this woman, like I said, I'm a big girl, right? And this woman, she's about 5 foot in a peanut, 110 dripping wet, had fake fur coat, makeup all done, right? She scared the bejesus out of me, right? She'd been sober about, I think, 18 years at that point, which is a long time for women in that area. It really was. And I asked her to sponsor me, and God bless her. She said yes. And she took me through the steps in about 3 weeks, start to finish. She was if she told me to do something, I would do it the day before. I was not procrastinating because she scared me, but that saved my life, because I realized at that point, 19 years old, no job, failing at school, no quality of life. I don't think I'm going to make it to 20, really praying I didn't make it to 20. So I thought I might as well give this a shot, Was it perfect? No. I still struggled with the God thing. I didn't find God until I was 5.5 years sober. Talk about fake it till you make it. I'd read the stuff, I'd read Bill's story about, was sitting at the table with Abby, right? And, Abby's like, oh, I found God. And Bill's like, oh, geez, I'm paraphrasing. And when Abby said, why didn't you find your own conception of God? I'm reading this in the canteen at my job at 5.5 years sober, right? And I'm like, wow, what if I find my own conception of God? 5.5 years sober. So I called an old sponsor of mine, sponsor number 23. And I called her and I said, I got to find my own conception of God. And she's like, Tanya, I've been trying to tell you that for 5.5 bloody years. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Right, guys? And really fake it till you make it work for me. Because I didn't know what God was. I was an atheist when I came to AA. I tried everything to find God. And it turned out it was right on my own doorstep the whole time. And, I use the group of drunks and, acronym of God, group of drunks. When I go to a meeting and I come out feeling better, that feeling was what God was to me. Now it's don't be an asshole. It really is. It really is. It's this, and it's a Scouser. It's from Liverpool. It's this tap on the shoulder, right? That's when I'm about to be doing something I shouldn't be doing, or I'm not doing something I should. It's like, hey, Tan, are you sure you want to do that, love? Because it's not going to wait. Oh, she's doing it. All right, well, I'll be here when when the crap hits the fan, and that's my God to me. And I have many examples of how, that's worked out for me. It's that gut punch, right? Like, because one thing you guys have given me in sobriety, I don't like it, is a conscience. Like I feel guilty when I'm like cheat at something, so I just don't do it because I don't like that bad feeling. But I needed that. I didn't really have a conscience, or if I did, it was drunk when I was drinking, right? So now I have that. I know how to do the next right thing. I just got to do it, So things evolve, I've been through the steps many times in the last 14 years. I've been through many different things. I've done therapy. I've done group things to deal with my head because, not everything is cured by the 12 steps. It's not. My alcoholism, yes. That's what's helped me. But with other things, like some mental health disorders that I've been diagnosed with, I need outside help. And it took me a while to realize that. But everything evolves in time. Nothing stays the same. My concept of God is different. My concept of right and wrong is different. How I work the steps is different, different. How I take people through the steps is different. I'm not like a copy and paste kind of sponsor. I can sponsor people who have difficulty in reading, period. I have sponsees in the past that have very little memory, so they can't quote things. And I tell them, it doesn't impress me that you can quote the big book or not, why? Because I can read, but I want to know your interpretation of how you feel about this. That's what impresses me, right. When you talk from the heart, and that's what I've learned over the years, First time I spoke at a meeting, I was 3 months sober. And that sponsor of mine was chairing, and she said, well, love, you've gone through the steps. It's time for you to do the chair. That's what they called it, but to speak, to do a lead. Right. So I go there, I'm all prepared, right? Dressed up all nice, a bit of makeup. I don't know how to do makeup, not even now. And I bring a sheet of paper with bullet points. So things I want to say, I get across in that 15, 20 minutes. And Dot sits next to me and she said, oh, what's that, love? And I said, oh, it's just bullet points, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, can I have a look? So, you trust your sponsor, right? And she takes it, rips it up, and says, you speak from here. You speak from the heart. Ever since then, I don't let anybody get up at a podium that's my sponsee and let them take up pieces of paper, unless it's a medallion and you need to thank some people. That's the only time. Because I realized, it doesn't matter. I was going to plan out what I was going to talk about tonight, and it's really not what I was planning on talking about, because it's not me. When I speak, when I share, when I do a lead, anything, I'm a channel of my higher power, right? I let my higher power decide on what we talk about, because I don't know, there might be somebody sitting in that room or listening in to this and think, wow, I'm really struggling with this one thing. And I have no plan at all on talking about it, and all of a sudden I say it, right? Like you were saying about the acceptance part of things, you don't need to understand it to accept it. That's a side swipe and a half, that is, right? And you're not expecting to hear it, and then the next thing you do. So I don't plan things when it comes to this kind of thing, because I can't be bothered, first of all. It requires time to prep. So I just wing it, wing the middle name. And it doesn't matter if I say the right thing. It doesn't matter, because we all have 3 talks when we speak or do a lead, right? We've got the one before, the one we do, and the one in the car after. I don't care. I'm hopefully, I'm a perfectionist at heart. I'm hopefully not going to log off after this tonight and be like, oh, I should have said this. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said. Who cares?
I think we could have you back. I feel like we just touched the surface.
Yeah. Yes.
I think there's more, which is an okay thing to do. I did want to share a couple stories here. We got a new review, 5 stars. Tina from Louisiana. I absolutely love the podcast. I began listening during the lockdown that happened with COVID. I look forward to every week to the new episode. I've suggested it to my ladies I sponsor and to others in our area AA groups. Thank you. I'm always surprised when I see
I know people are listening,
but I'm surprised when they have that. And a buddy Pat of mine has been considering going to a meeting, and he went to his first meeting.
Nice.
He said that the conversations that I've had with him online and listening to this podcast finally got his gumption up to finally go to a meeting. And he was invited to go to a men's meeting, which I told him you absolutely should do that. So, Pat, I think you're on your way.
Way to go, Pat.
Amazing.
All right.
I was honored with that. Tanya, thank you for sharing this story. I always come in with like 0 expectations. I don't know how these are going to go. I think people are going to love this story.
Yeah, me too.
You don't have to be like Tanya. You don't have to be British. All you have to do is identify with something.
And listen the
there.
next time to her beautiful accent that's cross of from the UK and from Eastern Canada.
I love
it's
it.
just beautiful. It's like
Thank you.
music.
I grew up myself. Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Great.
Thanks for
Tanya.
joining us this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.